Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is the Chronicles of Apple from the apple of my eye, and welcome. Please click and subscribe. There is not much going on in this channel since I've lost my initial videos that I did back in 2011. So anyhow, my point of doing these videos is to actually inspire the biggest influencers in the United States and everywhere else in the world, because I know that I have an input to tell you that you can perhaps share with other people, because this is the time that we collaborate. So I'm just a little butterfly fluttering around trying to give out information best I can, since I am older than Google anyway. So anyhow, I took care of a lot of veterans. That was my first job, volunteering in a veteran hospital. So when you work with veterans, you learn about war. Very rarely does a veteran get to really tell me how the war started. They just know that they were thrown into it. Okay. But there's a lot of stories that are, uh, common to a lot of the veterans. But the war is not something people like to talk about. And so I'm going to discuss it, because just because, okay, we haven't experienced, especially the Gen Z, not even their parents have gone through the World War, but my parents did. So I wanted to share a little bit about the war and different stories that people have told me working in the nursing home, from veteran hospitals, regular hospitals, nursing homes for the Jewish people, and nursing homes for regular people, for Christian people. So I'm going to first sing Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that brought my heart to sing. 'Twas grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Okay, so I had to do that because war is such a critical topic that most people don't even want to hear about. Everybody just assumes, no, we're not going to go through anything because, we've got guns and we've got our Bible. But it's happened to the best of countries. And for people, I have a lot of international friends, and a lot of them have gone through some things. For example, my Polish friend who lived in Poland while it was still under communism. So I have my little paper here, and I have this real cute things with animals and cute gadgetry, and which I think is really, really awesome for kids. I wish I made them, but I didn't. It has all of the fasteners. Um, so anyway, I'm gonna tell you some really interesting stories, and I'm gonna give you one story about a Holocaust survivor that I worked with. So I had one lady that had painting, and in one of the painting, it was like all in reddish blobs, and then something bright somewhere there, and it was really weird. And she must have such love for these paintings that she brought them to the nursing homes. Okay, it was kind of just laying down. I mean, people don't bring paintings in the nursing home. You're allowed to only decorate your place for so much. Sorry, it's like I'm like having eye bags right now. Um, they can only bring so much. But for this lady to have brought two paintings of hers, I think maybe more than two. And I was looking at it, and I would work with her, and she has had like a gazillion disease. Like, honestly, I've never seen a woman with such disease as she does, and she was still alive. She was probably in her 80s, and she was very gentle spirited. And then I would look at the painting, and I'm just kind of feeling eerie about them. I knew that they meant something. And sure enough, she had a tattoo. This is in somewhere in LA. And that LA, you know, that particular nursing home held some of the oldest um, Holocaust survivors. Honestly, they had one that's 100 some years old, and the doctor would literally yell at the nurses if something was off about this lady, because he wants to make sure she lives another, what, maybe 10 years. And me, given the fact that I could read, I get to read the little bit of the backstory. So, I don't necessarily ask my patients to divulge any information to me, but sometimes they'll tell me some stories. Now, this lady told me that the painting was about the Pope, the Pope praying for the children. Isn't it a beautiful painting? And I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, it's a beautiful painting. And all I could see was carnage. I mean, she had another painting that literally had metal pieces embedded on randomly over this picture, this painting of hers. Metal pieces, okay? And I just know this is just like, what is that, shrapnel? It's not good, but it must have been her way of just transposing the pain inside that she had painted it over in order to get it out of her. Now, most people, I just had this kind of personality. I've had people like literally come to me. They would just blurt out their life stories. And I've learned never to pry over anything, because sometimes the stories would give me such weight. And I know that it's healing for them, but it becomes a weight on me. And this particular lady, some of the things she told me, that like where she had to survive, she did not go in any details other than to talk about how she's managed and thrived in the US for so many years. But she's not dwelling back into that past. Now, I go and I have other patients, so I go to another room. And sure enough, this lady said, oh, yeah, that lady. Yeah, you could tell. She was telling me that she said that that lady had quite a story. I don't even know. I'm not telling her about the other person. She just knew that I came and I see some of the same ladies that she is, hanging out with when they have like Shabbat. So this lady told me, she's one of those people. She's got the tattoo. That poor lady, she's been through so much. And she says, I'm pretty sure she survived because they used her. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They used her, and she was fluttering her long lashes. She's had glaucoma, so the glaucoma treatment makes the eyelashes look really long. And she would just flutter her eyelashes, and she's like, oh, yeah, back in the days, they would separate the people. They'd incinerate some of us, and they do this to some of us. But if you were a little cute and pretty, they would take you in. So there are women. So what she was saying is that this Holocaust survivor was actually used as a sex slave of some kind. And considering the amount of disease that she's had, which I'm not going to divulge, it is very much a potential. Okay, but surprisingly, she survives. She lives. But there was just so much, she's been through. And this is where you could really tell how much the Jewish people value life. Because, like I said, I have never seen a doctor literally complain to the nurse and said, why is this level not this, and what is, like, why did you not tell me? And I'm like, these doctors usually don't care. So I don't know what he was griping over. I mean, people are older, they're going to be dehydrated here and there, but this doctor was very particular. Okay, and I realized that considering that they are holding on to people who had survived the Holocaust, these doctors have dedicated themselves, particularly in those hospitals, to know exactly what to do to keep them alive because of what had happened to them in the past. It's a memory, So I've had another story, and this is not a Jewish person. Okay, I've had several of those, patients from the Jewish. For the most part, those were the more like they've been through life. Like I said, they do not talk about what took place in the Holocaust. There were some of them that had tattoos. They will not talk about it. The same thing happens with veterans. Okay, rarely would you hear a veteran tell their stories. It would be another older person next door that's telling me the story. I had one guy, and he was 16, 17, and it was a time where people got drafted into the war. The men. Actually, my uncle was one of those drafted men. Okay, but he's still alive, and he wasn't in active war, but he was in the Air Force. But this particular man was very interesting because he wasn't that old when I had him. I would say he looked older than he is. He was in his late 60s, I believe. Or maybe 70s, I don't know, but he was a smoker, so they have a particular skin that just make them look more aged than they should be. And he wasn't talking because he had a stroke already. And I had another lady who was very heavy set, and she was a cutie. I love her. She's really funny. And she knew that little place called Gridley. Okay, Gridley, California. No one knows what it is. You blink an eye and it disappears. And in this little Gridley town, this nursing home resident have had a stroke. He's a smoker. He's got COPD. Okay, you will never know his name, so don't worry about it. He basically would, like, you can tell, like, he would cuss. He would cuss even with a bad slur. You could just tell there's like an anger with this guy because he's very frustrated from the stroke. And the one lady, the heavyset lady, told me that man, him and his best friend, volunteered when people got drafted in the military, meaning they didn't wait until they got drafted. They volunteered in. He was about 16, 17, one of the youngest men to have gone to the military in that area, volunteering. And they knew him because he was apparently quite a hottie when he was young. And he felt called to duty. And that man was one of the few people that was in the Pearl Harbor. And basically, he was a smoker at 16, 17. And he was a little young private in the Navy. And he decided to excuse himself from his friends because he wanted to smoke. So he stepped out of the big ship. And lo and behold, that ship exploded. And he was a survivor because he was a smoker. So, of course, no one's going to tell him to stop smoking after that. So he came out, and that's when his best friend died, basically. His best friend died. He survived because he was a smoker who went out. So that was an interesting story of a man. And he was, like I said, he was not in his 80s. He's far from the 80s. At the very oldest, he was probably 70. but he might even be in the 60s. But he was young. I don't know when the Pearl Harbor was, but this lady told me, yeah, he is a very good looking man back in his days, and he was in the news for having survived the Pearl Harbor. So let me just go over a little bit about what goes on, for example, after the Pearl Harbor. Not that I'm a historian, but I know that great historians are going to catch on and do theirs. And we do need to hear these stories, by the way, because people are hooked on TikTok, okay? Hooked on TikTok and idolizing terrorists, which is totally insane. When the Pearl Harbor happened, there was a lot of people, and I've had some of those patients too, the Japanese people that was put in concentration camp because of what happened in the Pearl Harbor. And if that's not collective punishment, I don't know what. But that's Nagasaki, Hiroshima happened because of that Pearl Harbor. And around that time, there's a lot of like testing of nuclear power. And everybody would eventually be showing off their nuclear prowess, okay? But yeah, so I wanted to explain a little bit about what my parents went through and what active war looks like, okay? And why I know for a very fact Israel is not committing genocide. Number one, the population of Jews has doubled 6 times. Okay, so whatever population they had before, they grew over 6 times. And if you go to Israel, you know, if they wanted to, if people are just really insane, they could have mass sterilized them. No, they didn't. Muslim people have a lot of kids. The Jewish, from the time they're in their 20s, they are being hurried up to have babies and babies because they have to populate the country. But nothing like the Muslims, who can have one guy and 5 wives spitting out a kid every other year. You have a lot of kids. And I know for a fact, like, they're even advancing. They have like solar system now. Last time I went, a lot of solar system. They have their water above so that it would get the sun, and that will be the heater, okay? And they would just have their homes are stacked up, like they make them flat and then they build on top, and then they make them flat and then they build on top. So they just keep building stuff on top, on top, on top, and that will be like probably 3 or 4 generations of Arab in that one particular house, okay, in that little, you know, compound. So they are not stopping the Muslim people from procreating. That's one fact, okay. Number 2, okay, so not only do you see them breeding, okay, the Jews doesn't seem to mind it. They have their own. They just know that, okay, they have children, we got to have our children too. Now, the other thing you're going to observe is that if you were in Israel, is that the Jews are very caring for their close. They have friends among the Palestinians, the Bedouins and everyone else, okay? And you know, they just kind of had this, just like, okay, if you've seen people literally have like a bear as a best friend, it's not any different from that. Like, I would say regardless of the situation, they have a love for them, like a serious love for a particular Palestinian person, and they would greet them, okay? They would greet them. The idea that they're all like walking around spitting on Christians and all that stuff, I mean, there may be those crazy ones, okay? There are crazies in every culture, okay? There are like what you call the righteous extremists, and that's the reason why the secular Jewish people are very afraid of very religious people, because they see them, because what they see as an, you know, an extremist Muslim, for example, would be like committing suicide and sacrificing their children. And I just realized something in the Filipino song that I sang. It said, I have nothing to offer but my soul, my heart, soul, and my life, okay? But when Filipinos say that does not mean we are going to commit suicide for God. We don't. Filipinos, because of our immersion to the from the Catholicism to the Christianity, okay, we are not, we do not uphold any suicide whatsoever. When I say that in a song for the Lord, the meaning of offer my life has nothing to do with death, like a physical death. It is basically crucifying your flesh. And what I mean by crucifying your flesh is, I'm not saying those crazy things like self-flagellation, okay? It's basically staying away from things that are not favored by God. Okay, so to offer your life is to do the sacrifice for your family, working hard, raising your family, putting up with different things, and having graciousness to other people that probably don't deserve it. Like whether you're putting up with a crazy child that needs a lot of disciplining, or putting up with your mother-in-law, your mom, temperamental people. That's what that means, is loving people to the point of forsaking your own offense, and basically sacrificing your life, like working hard and not complaining. Okay, so Filipino culture, we are probably the most forgiving people. Okay, meaning we've been conquered by different people and we married each and every one of them. Um, that's very much a fact. Okay, and so Filipinos are like the hot dogs of Asia. We are very mixed blood, and we do not believe in incest, because we believe that incest causes a lot of deformities, and so it is frowned upon to even have a liking for a third or fourth cousin. Like, you want to make sure you are not related, and so marrying a foreigner might actually be good because that just takes that away. And so anyway, going back to some of the veteran stories I had or war stories. One of the interesting thing, okay, the difference between the issue with Israel and how they're handling the Gaza Strip. When Israel cannot, they are totally pissed off that they are being targeted in a most inhumane way. And those people, the Hamas people that did that to them, were very drugged. They're not just drugged up, there was nobody there. Okay, there was nobody there. Okay, that's what they said. Technically speaking, those are demonically possessed people. But the problem there is that all of the Palestinians, the Arabs, were cheering along, and their loved ones are in pieces, scattered, raped, incinerated. It is just like the Holocaust. And if not enough people would have stopped it, it would have spread and spread and spread and gotten bigger. They would have just kept going. But of course, they were too, they got into like some serious orgy. And I guess that's enough of the distraction. They couldn't go further out, okay? And then the people that have rifles finally subdued them. It would have been weird if if most of the Jewish people did not have a gun, that 1,200 people would have been way more. It would have been by the tens of thousands. With the kind of barrage that took place that particular day, it totally overwhelmed the Iron Dome, and it totally overwhelmed all the soldiers. Plus, the soldiers were told, put your guns in the storage. I don't know why they came up with that crazy law. They got overly confident, and they're like, oh, it's all about peace. It's okay. It's okay. And then there you go. So considering that fact, okay, if you were to compare what happened during the Pearl Harbor, and there was concentration camp, They got so freaked out by Japanese people that they had to put them in a concentration camp. And, now that may not have happened to every single person, but it happened in certain pockets that some people had to tell me about it, that they lived to have witnessed that, where people had been picked up for this particular concentration camp. So that is collective punishment, okay? And Nagasaki, Hiroshima, that is again collective punishment for what had happened in the Pearl Harbor. But what took place too, you've got to realize that's why history can be really cruel and we need to learn from it. I don't think because of what had happened, the Japanese government would want to redo that again, okay? They're extremely cautious now in terms of how they even dare go on, a world domination, okay? That is no longer the case, okay? So the other thing that you can tell is like, considering the fact that people had celebrated this severely, the Jews are right now so protective of the Arab people in Israel that it is so surprising that after all that had happened, okay, yes, they're demolishing all these things, but it is a necessity. It is a sheer necessity. Because even though they know that they've had cool friends in Gaza, they know that those nice, innocent people will have no effect and ability to really prevent the damage to their families with the way it is basically in their daily prayer call to go and attack the Jewish people. I would not want to know what they say on those Muslim prayer calls. It is like, it's a belly ache, I would say. And there's a lot of tolerance that the Jewish people have. In fact, I've seen cases where you would, there would be like little kids taunting an IDF, taunting the IDF, trying to get a reaction. And why would parents allow that? And you've got to realize, because they don't have the same government, okay? The children are not being held responsible by the people in authority on the Hamas section. And then the parents are in such animosity generationally against the Jewish people that they don't care if their kids act up, okay? They don't care if their kids act up. And you do not see that in the United States. I don't see, except during some riots. And again, those are another controversial things. Another thing that's very surprising to me is like, if you look, okay, and going back to the Second World War, my parents were children at the time. And I didn't even realize hopefully they did not spend 3 years like that, because that's quite crazy. I had no idea it lasted 3 years. Hopefully by the time it hit the province, they just had a few months to endure of living underground. Like, they were told to basically, there is no leaflets, okay? There is no, here's the direction. There's packages of food for you. They're just told, get up and leave. They're just told, okay, the Japanese people are going to come and start like shooting us down. We better go to the provinces because they're going to hit all the cities. And the province is like the lower portion of the northern part. So it got to those little tiny towns. Unbelievable. So they have to go to the forest, carry only what they have in their backpack, dig a hole, okay, literally dig a hole, and lived in there for months. No electricity, no cooking lamp, and you're just probably like, I don't know how they did it. I mean, I wish that I had asked more questions to my parents, because I would just hear the interesting story that they had to like like their nanny took them for a shower every single day in the river, and during the day there was no war, only at night. But if at nighttime and it starts to get dark, the sirens go off and you're still hanging out there, you're going to be shot to death. And if you're a woman and you are pretty, they are going to keep you and they're going to use them for comfort women, and they're basically rape. Okay, they're like sex slaves. Um, so just like, so if you look in the Holocaust, they did that, the Jewish people too. And those are the lucky ones, okay? Now, in there was a book in the house one time, and I couldn't read at the time, so I would look. There were some pictures, and my father explained to me that that is a book that my uncle brought, I guess, from Spain. So my uncle was in Spain at some point, I don't know if it's after the war or whatever it is, but he was in Spain, um, and he was supposed to be educated there. He lived there for 11 years, and I think he just got abused by his family. I don't really have too much good things to say about the Spaniard family. They're a little bit different. So I'm looking at Spain right now, and the Spain literally totally bowing down to the almighty oil or something, because they have no need to claim Palestine as as a nation. That only happens because they have to bow down to somebody that can give them good oil for cheap or something. So they're selling their souls. Somebody in that government is selling their soul to the almighty oil. So Norway too, and I'm so glad that they are, that the Americans are talking smack about those nations, Norway, Spain, and Ireland. I couldn't believe it too with Ireland. I mean, I guess their Christianity is down the drain, totally down the drain. And this is why I'm speaking up, is because having this democratic leadership that we have, it can totally screw the diplomacy of the US with Israel if we do not speak up. And number two, okay, the worst enemy we could ever have is God. That is the worst thing we could ever have. If we go against God, calamities are going to hit the United States, because it is only graced by God, by the fact that we are a Christian nation. The moment we forget that, we can easily become like Ireland. Okay, we can easily become like Norway and just bowing down to terrorism. Okay, and it's bad enough that the United Nations is affiliated heavily to the United States, but we are still like very supportive. There's a lot of people here, individually as a Christian, in support of Israel, and I pray that we keep it that way as much as possible, as long as possible. But the war that had taken place in the Second World War, this came, when it comes all of a sudden. It comes all of a sudden. Because when I look at my parents, okay, my dad does not have a birth certificate because it was burned down. And going back to that book that I saw, my dad told me that that book is about what the Germans did during the time of the Second World War. And him and my dad told us, or at least me, that there was so much carnage, there were so much bodies, that they literally were turning human skin into lampshades and bags and shoes. Human skin, okay, being sold. So that means that somebody out there is like ripping the skin of a dead person and dipping it in different chemicals and painting them and turning them into bags and lampshades and what shoes. It's disgusting. It is literally like cannibalism. And in that same book, there was a story about the black people. They were used for experimentation and they gave them syphilis. And my uncle was telling me this story because he wanted to become a doctor and he was reading those, he had kept those books, okay? And we even had a book that had like about evolution. And my dad was teasing me and he said, Apple, do you believe this? And so you have the monkey and then the ape and then finally you've got a human being over here. And my dad explained to me that it's called the survival of the fittest. So the survival of the fittest, I later on found out, is that if you have any deformity, if you're too old, if you got into an accident and you become an invalid, or you have some issues and you are now discordable, because they only want, you're gonna cost so much to the whole group that you should not even exist. Okay, that is the mentality of the communism, and this is how I understood communism. So interestingly, as a child, I looked at that and I said, no, Papa, I don't believe that. I think humans are humans. I don't think we are ever ape. And he just laughs. He was just trying to see how I would reason about this. And I started going to Catholic school, and they said, we're different from animals. And I stick with that to this day. But so the one thing that took place too with the German is that they got so obsessed with features. So the flatter your face, the closer you are to the apes. And we do share certain DNAs with the apes, but that's because it's the same creator. The creator that created humans also created animals. And maybe for his own joy and for good laughs, okay? God created monkeys a certain way that kind of is like mimic humans, okay? But that's as far as I could ever, see monkeys. They're not humans. But there are people, by the way, when I was in the United States, I could not believe there were some people. Yeah, we're just like apes. We're just like higher form of apes. And I cannot believe it. It's just so insensitive because I'm thinking, okay, like those are the kind of people that I'm like, they're covert, but they have some severe prejudice that you better not get stuck with them on a really bad situation. So anyway, so there are those, and those stories are real. Later down the line, I had heard about it more, and I was able to read and I was able to understood those things, and I did finally read about the experimentation on black people. There were sterilization. And honestly, the only way society put a stop on all those, okay, if you look at the kind of ethics we have ethics on how human DNA is procured or experimented. Okay, there's a law on that. There's ethics on that. We also have an ethics now on, not just sterilizing, like forced sterilization of people, whether they're prisoners or, people with disability. All of the ethics that we have all centers around the fact that the Bible gives value to humans and doesn't want to dehumanize humans. Okay, that come from Judeo-Christian ethics. The United States Constitution and the law all revolves around Judeo-Christian ethics, meaning it is from the book of Moses, 5 books of Moses, and then also the gospel. Okay, so this is how we base our law. There are people, if they had come from places that are predominantly Islamic, they do not know. They don't know that the US and what we call Western civilization is leaning on the side of Judeo-Christian. They don't understand, so much about Islamic Sharia law and how that is so different. They actually might even think that's better because the punishment uh, in a Muslim country is so severe for stealing. And if you don't like drinking, you might, think that, oh, it's better to have this. My husband will never drink because we're in a Muslim country. Okay, my husband will not run off with some woman because we're in a Muslim country. Because but the law is not the same for the higher class and the um, real Muslims and the non-Muslims. Okay, but if they are living in those places, they don't know what Judeo-Christian ethics mean and why the Western civilization is the Western civilization. They don't know that it came from the Word of God. Now, there had been effort to remove that the name Judeo-Christian and just call it Western civilization, as though it just sprouted that way. That all of a sudden, people in Ireland and Scotland just quit killing each other, and they don't know that it's because of the propagation of the Bible and the Spirit of God. Okay, but now all those torturous things that had happened in Europe now just lays into the history and into the museum area and a thing of the past. And if they were to practice anything anywhere close to that, it will have to be hidden. Okay, now it's becoming normalized through witchcraft and all that stuff. But if you were to look at the history of Italy in Rome and everything, all of the what you would see as in the catacombs, which is basically all of the people that are buried deep into this labyrinth of labyrinth of tombs. Okay, those catacombs in France, Italy, all those are usually from the Christian sectors. When a body is being desecrated by the Roman, the Christians would sequester the body before it gets incinerated and be mocked, and they would take it down. Okay, so they will give it a proper burial. So it is definitely Christian because they even have if it's a square, that means that it is a regular person. If it has an arch, that is the martyr. Those are the Christians that died for the faith. So, again, I'm bringing up some stories, from, the war times. One very interesting story that I came across, because like I said, most of the veterans, you don't want to make them unhappy and start having traumatic PTSD. Okay, so I don't torture my patients like that. So I would just know if they've been through war. I try to give them as much respect as I could. I don't try to, I don't get upset if they get angry or they start cursing or whatever. They're old, they can say whatever they want. So it's only fascinating when I hear stories that are told by other people that are, they like to chat and talk about the other patients, and they knew the story of that person when they were younger. So one story that I have, and I was in, what is this? Manteca. It's somewhere in the middle of nowhere, California. Modesto, not Manteca, Modesto. I had a patient, and she was, her husband was a soldier. I believe the husband already died. She was British. And there was something about her presence that it's very interesting. And actually, I came to her room. She had a knee replacement, and she has this British accent, which is a little bit milder than it's not a strong British accent, but she still have it. And I would go to her room, and I have to spend an hour or so. Someone's have to have 75 minutes on those new patients. So I would treat them in the gym and then I would follow them in the room, or vice versa, or I would get them ready from the room to the gym. And she realized that I was a person of faith. So I don't know if there was a joke that I had, and something about the name of Hitler got brought, and she just, I mean, everything, her demeanor just changed. And she says, "That is a terrible man." And she was like, I just, anyway, I don't know if it was something in the news or something in the conversation brought about the name of Hitler. And she told me that she came from London, and when she was young, she was a teenager or something, the war broke out. And she says that her house was demolished by the bombs that got thrown in London. And she said, if it's not, and her husband was one of the men that actually saved her life, like picked her up from the rubble and took her out of the house. She ended up marrying this man, but there was something else that was interesting with her. She said that only God could have kept her alive with the way the damage was happening at that house during that time. And then she says, I love praying for people. I said, well, I don't know why, but I asked her, what do you do for a living? And she says, oh, I work in a factory. And I was going, like, a factory? I've never seen, too many people working in a factory. And she says, yeah, she was a manager in a cannery somewhere. I don't even know if it's exactly there or some other cannery prior. I don't know how long she's been in Modesto. But she said she's worked in the cannery, and she's experienced trauma. And I think this trauma was so severe that it was as though she was not able to function, and she was in a state of coma. I mean, she was not in a state of trauma for quite some time, and she must have had to pray. But the Lord delivered her. And she says the fact that the Lord has delivered me, and she said that she was saved. Okay, she knew that she was saved by the Lord. Like, God sent that man to have saved her, basically her husband. She said that when she prays for people, it takes away their trauma. So she says she prays for people because she asked me if I believe in prayer, and I said yeah. Now the odd thing about her is that she was Catholic, but she puts her hand on me, and she says that she worked as a manager, and these poor women, like a lot of migrants that are probably illegal, they would work in the factory, and she was their manager. They would come one by one and ask her for help because, they don't really have, if they're going through things like if they were abused at home, or they've been abused in the past, or they've been through whatever, she wanted to help them. And I think she prayed for one lady, and then that lady brought another lady. That lady brought another lady, and she would lay her hands on their hand, and it would take away their trauma. So anyway, I don't know how much of this I could believe. And she says, come here, I want you to feel this. So I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna freak out about it. So I gave her my hand, and she laid her hand on it. And I kid you not, there was a wind coming out of her hand that was pouring down my hand. And she didn't tell me, she just said that she's praying for me. She prayed for me, and I could feel, it's like her hand is some kind of a force field. There was something coming out of it. And in all my life, I had never experienced that. I've seen like where somebody laid hands on me, and there was one time that it was like, okay, I didn't even want to believe it. I still didn't believe that guy. But anyhow, for some odd reason, I passed out. Now, I don't know if there was some kind of crazy potion that they put on me, but This lady didn't. Okay, I just know her hands was clean. I just took her out of the bathroom, and there was no air in there, but there was something coming out of her hand. So technically speaking, it was very odd. But I'm not a Catholic, so I'm not gonna fall for that. But there was something about her, and I think it's because of the trauma. It's like the Lord delivered her from something, and somehow she technically has some kind of out of compassion, is able to help women like her that went through trauma because of the war. She was able to help women, and she was so humble. There was nothing about this lady that was ever braggadocious, and that is one thing about her. I think the suffering from this war was just so bad. But yeah, so those are some really. There were more stories from from the veterans. One thing very interesting, and this is something I know about the veterans, there's a very high rate of suicide, depression, and suicide among veterans. And there's a lot of trauma. Sometimes the trauma can just arise from boot camp. Many times it can happen. Like I had a veteran who, again, this is not, I didn't get the information firsthand, but there was a therapist that I was working with in this mental health VA, and this older lady, she's actually Jewish. This older lady, she's very dedicated for these veterans that have schizophrenia, and we did pottery, and we did, they could do the arts and crafts, and these are the more controlled, privileged VA patients that doesn't have a history, hasn't had any history of being physically violent and inappropriate. So they get to come down there, and that place literally reek. Men just have certain body odors. I mean, they must have. Some of them had been like homeless or just the hygiene part. But we would have this older man come in, and the one guy, I was like, what? He seems so normal. What is he doing with us? And this looked like a sweet old man. He would come in, do some artwork, and he would leave. He would come again, do some artwork, and he would leave. And there was nothing weird about him. I mean, there's just nothing. And then, like I did read the history. There was this one thing there, maybe depression, but there was nothing too detailed. And then this lady told me, well, let me tell you what happened to him, because apparently that old man told her what exactly happened to him. The reason he developed the depression is because this guy was a high lieutenant or something, or a high commander, and he was in command of this entire platoon. So he's a very responsible, very good. But anyway, he did one thing, and it was a small mistake. His entire platoon died, wiped out. And because of that, this guy became suicidal. So I was like, what? I can't even remember what exactly. It was something stupid, like a bad timing. It all was just like that. It was just some stupid thing, and he was responsible for the death of this entire platoon. And so I was like, ooh, wow, that's really crazy. Okay. And so like I said, that's the reason why I don't try to dig out stories, because I don't want them to start to like have PTSD on me. Because those things can happen. Like, for example, you could just be grabbing a cane, and the person will assume that you're picking up a bayonet. Like, it would come off as a bayonet. Okay, so this is the issue with war. And I think as a Christian, we need to understand that we do have a voice in order to prevent certain things or warn people, because our job is to preserve people's lives. And I'm sharing this information because it is really critical that the people from the Second World War gets involved in educating us, because there is such a huge amount of useful idiots for I call them the terrorist sympathizer. They're quote unquote valuing life so heavily to the point that they want regular citizen to not even fight anybody, willing to kill their own young and willing to kill their own children. And in a war situation, I know for a very fact there was no tents for my parents, there was no humanitarian aid, there was no food tossed to them. Okay, they basically just have to feed off of what they found in the forest. Okay, scavenge through it. Like my dad had guns, and the reason why they had guns is that at 12, 14, the only way that their family could eat is that they kill something. Like there's not enough food in the house, and the older men had to find food either in the water or in the forest. I mean, if they find a bat, then they'll eat that. And my dad learned taxidermy because there's just that's what people did back in those days. They have to eat what they can kill, you know. And I just I wish I could ask my dad those stories. And I remember my dad one time telling me, like, there was no electricity and he didn't pay the electric bill, and he said, don't worry, Apple, you can just go to your grandma's house, they have electricity there. I'm like, Dad, why did you not pay the electric bill? And he said, I was trying to save money. I'm like, Dad, you work for the electric company. Why did you not pay the electric bill? This is really embarrassing. It's been days now. And he says, well, don't worry, Apple. When I was your age, we had no electricity and we lived that way and we were fine. And so now I have to suffer. I have to suffer learning to live in a blackout, not because the government really, not that there was no electricity, it's just that he chose for me to experience a blackout for several days so he could tell me the story about what they had to go through in the war times. Or he was making a joke. I mean, it's not a joke, but war, when it happens, it can happen really fast. And we need to really be aware that if there's a way we can prevent it for as long as we can, let's do that. Because when I saw all these riots, and we've been having these crazy antifadas and every other year, and they have to ransack stores and everything, that just goes to tell you we've got sleeper cells that is in place for when they create a nationwide invasion of some sort. Now, the great thing is we've still got guns, and we Americans will fight tooth and nail to keep their guns and their Bible. But we have to be very well aware that anytime there is a mass demonstration, they can bring those elements out. And like I said before, I don't know what hole in this world we have in the United States. I don't know what hole they're coming from, but they appear to just be professional rioters. And sometimes we call them the Antifa or something else, or they could be meth. There could be a meth underground lab that people are just raised to be like rioters. Okay, not rioters, but rioters. So anyway, I'm gonna end it right here. And like I said, there's a big difference between and typical war. I mean, the protection that the people in Palestine and the Palestinians or the Arabs, the kind of protection they have is nowhere near the kind of protection anyone else could ever have during the Second World War. Not the Philippines, not the Vietnam War, not the Korean War. The Korean War, that's really insane. I've had stories from veterans that literally tell me, you do not want to mess with the Koreans. Their commander will shoot them if they fall asleep. The ethical code for the Korean military is such that they can be extremely brutal, even to their own fellow soldier. If they were to fall asleep, they'll shoot them down. Um, it that's a crazy story, but that was a man that had to work with a Korean. Um, they said, generally speaking, having Americans on your side makes every war much better. So whether that's true or not, I'm just gonna say that it probably should be, because maybe we have a better spirit in the U.S. I also believe that Filipinos make really good soldiers, not because I said that, but because several people had told me that. It goes along with the value of human life in the Philippines. So um, that value of human life largely centers from the fact that most of the Filipinos are actually the same people in different parts of Asia that ran away from an Islamic invasion, and they just populated another island across with all their loved ones. And um, so we are far more, we're more into having a good life than, the loyalty to even the Philippines is not sometimes as high as just the love to live life to the fullest. So Filipinos are very migratory people, and we assimilate to different cultures, and we try to take care of people, and we don't want to anything in the past for the Filipinos, we leave it as history and we just move forward. But for me personally, I like to learn what had happened in the war, how it started, and how it ended. And I pray every day, like I'm encouraging people to fast and pray, not just for Israel, but for our nation and what's going on in the different nations that are becoming embedded in war or about to have war. And we really need to sympathize and prevent the war. One other thing, and the next time I'm going to go over is it's called replacement theology, and this is replacement theology. This is something that is plaguing a lot of the Christians. Replacement theology. Replacement theology is very dangerous. It literally can turn many Christians in a pseudo-Nazi, because the value for the Jews is diminished by the fact that they are Christians. And I am so thankful that the Lord took me to Israel to show me what that does. And I'm very thankful that the Lord took me to Israel to truly understand what the Jews are going through, what the Christians are going through in Israel, and what the Arabs are going through in Israel. The people walking on eggshells are not the Arabs, it's the Jews, okay? There's only so many places that Jews can go before they can actually get assaulted, whereas Arabs don't necessarily get assaulted. The only times you would see like there's like some skirmishes is because there's like taunting, and the moment there's camera, people act up. And also the fact that a lot of the people in Israel have PTSD. That's just inherent because of how they live their lives. And it's really interesting to see that there is always progress in Israel, no matter how many wars that they've been through. And I'm really excited to see what another year. I mean, I hope and pray that this war is almost to capacity of, it's almost to the victory. Um, I thank the Lord that there is already a lot of there's laws being passed to deport people that are rioting on the streets and discriminating. I don't care if the discrimination is um, you know, on the Jews, or whether it's, the discrimination is being done for the blacks, but we certainly need to foster protection over the nation. protection over the nation and our people to not be bullied. We don't want any of those bullying happening. There needs to be respect for the authority, no matter what we say, because it things are really can easily get out of hand, especially because again there are professional rioters, and I believe that those professional rioters are like those people that had come in illegally and they have some kind of support, and maybe they live underground. I don't know where they live really, but they are basically taking command from the powers that be for certain purposes and media purposes in particular, and that is called the CFR. So the CFR is part of the globalist agenda to take control of mass media, and I'm gonna just discuss that next time. So thank you and God bless.